Are you looking for an experience that will grow your teenagers' faith, increase their leadership skills, and teach them the discernment to engage with the world all around them, all while taking them on the adventure of a lifetime? I mean, who isn't looking for that? If your teenager loves fun, adventure, and wants to grow in their faith and leadership this summer, then send them to Excel's Summer Leadership Camp. Excel's Summer Leadership Camp is a 12-day experience for passionate young leaders looking to discover God's truth, to discern wisely, and live wholeheartedly. Your teenager will embark on a transformative journey in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where they'll build lasting friendships in the context of community, embark on thrilling adventures like camping, rock climbing, whitewater rafting, and they will receive expert training and certifications in categories like CPR and wilderness first aid. Each aspect of the camp is woven together to help them learn to discover truth, to discern wisely, and take godly action in the context of real-life situations. To learn more or begin an application, go to theexcelcamp.org. That's theexcelcamp.org. Hurry, because summer is just around the corner.
Man, kids are brutally honest, aren't they?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And Mike is the one. If you want to know the truth, Mike is going to tell you the truth.
Welcome to the Reclamation Podcast, where our goal is to help busy people reclaim good practices for faith and life. Here's your host, Tony Meltenberger.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Reclamation Podcast. It is such a joy to be with you as I bring you another interview of a leader who's finding ways to reclaim the balance between faith and life. Today's leader is James Keith Posey. He is kind of pastor extraordinaire down at Century Church. He's the executive pastor there. It's a church plant. Now, the other thing that's really interesting about James Keith is he is a singer-songwriter, really creative guy. I had the privilege of working with him for a number of years at our church in Ohio, and James Keith brings this kind of creative energy into the room that is just so much fun. So through the course of our conversation, we dive into what it's like to balance that, to balance his role as the executive pastor, also what it means to have 4 kids and try to manage all of it at once. It's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Here's my conversation with James Keith Posey. Hey everybody, welcome to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm Tony, and I'm here with dear friend, accountability partner, Pastor James Keith Posey. JK, what's happening, man?
Hey Tony, how you doing, man? It's great to talk to you today.
It's good to talk to you as well. Now, I've had the privilege of knowing you for, almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
We're old. Why don't you give everybody kind of a look inside your life, who you are, what do you do, where you at? Give us the rundown.
Yeah, so I grew up in Alabama, grew up in Birmingham, was a theater kid and did theater and music and ended up moving to New York City to go to school and just had the opportunity to be an actor and performer on stage. And I traveled and just had this dream lifestyle of being an actor in New York and was there during September 11th. And that really changed everything.
Oh, wow.
It really reset my focus and started me on the path of what I didn't know at the time, but then led me to what God was actually calling me to do.
What was that morning like for you, JK?
It unreal as I'm sure it was for all of us and so many more. Certainly, those that were in New York, I was actually in my apartment. My brother-in-law calls and says, "Get to your roof right now." And I had no idea, what was going on. I had not turned the TV on yet. So I went to the roof of my building and just about the time I got up there, I turned around and I saw a plane come across and hit, one of the trade buildings. And what I didn't know at the time is another plane had already hit. So I saw the second plane.
Oh, wow.
Come. And so over the next few minutes and certainly hours, more people gathered on the roof and we just watched in disbelief and in pain. And I just remember the first building coming down and we just all hit our knees, and it was that feeling of the world is coming to an end. And so it was a tough day. And 30 days later, I ended up moving from New York back to Alabama, and actually ended up in Montgomery, where I am now. And ultimately discovered a call into ministry. I found myself in a church, which seemed odd at the time, but I saw there was a big poster on the side of the church that said Best of Broadway Concert. And I was like, well, maybe I should go check that out.
Because you had done Broadway in New York, right?
Yes. And so I walk in and I meet a guy named Jack Horner, who's the music director of the church. And what's crazy now, so many years later, he became my mentor. And I worked with him for several years, and then went into full-time ministry and have been in full-time ministry now for 17 years. And it's been a wild, wild journey.
Yeah, so tell us a little about what you're doing now, specifically what church you're at. I mean, give us the scope of your life, because I think that you have a little bit different life than most.
Yeah, so I'm a church planter. A close friend of mine, Patrick Quinn, who is also a pastor, he contacted me several years ago and said, hey, I'm thinking about starting a multi-site out of my church. And he was the teaching pastor at a mega church here in Montgomery called Fraser. And so he said, I feel like God is calling me to go out on the edge and plant a multi-site of Fraser in a town called Pike Road. And I'm listening to him say this, and I'm like, you're insane. Like, why would anybody want to do that? You're preaching to thousands of people every week. You have this incredible platform and leadership leading at that great church. Why would you want to leave that and go preach at a multi-site? And he just kept saying, I don't know. It's just what God is laid on my heart and God is calling me to do. And so the more I talked to him about it, I realized that, oh crap, I think God is calling me to help him.
Oh, wow.
And specifically the word that came from God was help. And so I was like, I don't know how to reconcile that, because I was at Ginghamsburg United Methodist Church in Ohio, and similar to Patrick, I had the opportunity to have great influence and a great platform and lead worship to a lot of people. But this word of help just kept coming into my mind. And so I jumped, and so I moved down to Montgomery to be a helper. And so Patrick and I have been leading this church, which as of October of 2017 launched as its own church. And so we got the blessing from Fraser to become our own church. And that's what was birthed, is a new church called Century Church. And so we spend our days working in the church plant world and tearing down and setting up a church every week.
Yeah, because you guys are still meeting in a gym, aren't you?
That's right. So we met. There is a brand new school here in Pike Road. Pike Road is a new town in Alabama, and so they have a brand new elementary school. And so in the gymnasium, well, we really set up from the front door all the way through the school that leads to the gym, and that's where our worship center is.
And so what time do you have to be there on Sunday morning?
We start setting up the school at 5:30 on Sunday mornings. Yes. But it's amazing. We have a team of volunteers, and they are absolutely unreal. They show up at 5:30, they move the trailers around, and they start unloading gear, and they transform the school into a church.
Now, how many years have you guys been doing that?
So we're on over 3 years now doing that. 2 years as a multi-site church, and now over 1 year doing it as a church plant.
That's incredible.
So the reality is people are a little weary, a little tired, you know.
Yeah, and now your role in the church plant, I know that you were a worship leader at Ginghamsburg. That's where you and I met. What is your role there? Because from what I understand, it's an expanded role. That it's more than just worship.
That's correct. So when I came to Fraser to work on the multi-site plan, the design was for there to be 5 multi-site churches, and that I would speak into the worship at all campuses. When we moved to a church plant and launch as a new church, we decided that it would make more sense for me to be the executive pastor at the church. And so I'm really speaking in to the staff. I'm speaking into the systems of the church, and really the vision that is coming from our lead Pastor Patrick. I'm taking that vision and then working the system to, hey, okay, that's an incredible vision of where God is calling us to go and to do. Now, how do we do that? And so I'm the how-to guy. Now,
in addition to that, you've got a lot of things going on at home as well, right? So tell us a little bit about your family. I mean, the pocket full of posies, as if you ever want a great hashtag to follow on Instagram.
That's right. So I'm married to the most beautiful wife, Denise, and we've been married now for 13 years. It's amazing to me to think about. Thank you. We have 4 incredible children, and their age ranges still blow my mind. We have 6-year-old that's Hank the Tank. 8-year-old Micah, who is lately been a monster basketball player. I mean, he's blowing my mind.
I saw he put up like 12 points the other day, didn't he?
Yeah, 12. First game, 10 points. Then he comes in with 12 points. I'm like,
look out, right, LeBron.
That's my boy. That's my boy. So my other son is 10 years old, Jack, who is just the coolest kid on the planet. And then our oldest is Bella. She's 11, but she'll be 12 coming up in October.
So how do you balance the responsibilities of being the executive pastor of a church plant, being a dad, being a husband? How are you managing what do you do to keep your life straight?
You know, Tony, it's really interesting. I think in seasons I do better than other seasons. And so obviously there are.
Give me for example on that.
Yeah. So, obviously your Christmases and your Easters, things are going to ramp up in the church. And so it creates a situation where you have to be really intentional with your family and figure out other ways, because you may not have the after school time with your kids, or you're putting your kids to bed. So you have to be really creative on what you do in those seasons. And so in my past, what I've typically done is, for my wife, we do a lot of lunch dates, or I'll go to the kids' school and have lunch with them and visit them and that kind of thing. What I did not anticipate in the church plant world is those seasons never die down. So you're expecting after Christmas for everything to kind of settle down a little bit, or after Easter things to settle down. That does not happen in the church plant world.
Why do you think that is?
I think one is because you're so small staffed in a church plant. You're still trying to get it off the ground and get momentum started, and then it's like a new business. You've got your heart and soul poured into it. It's certainly your baby, and so you're trying to watch every facet of it to make sure the baby can actually grow up and be able to walk on its own and those kind of things. So there's a little bit of just watching things like a hawk and trying to keep your hands on every little piece of it to make sure nothing goes wrong.
So not having those down seasons, how do you reclaim that important time with your family, or I mean, I think I saw recently, was it last year you did an Ironman?
That's right. So
I mean, how do you even listen, that's a ridiculous amount of training hours.
Yeah.
How's all that work?
Well, at the height of the training, it was a 4 or 5 hour a day training, because the reality is you're on the bike for many hours. And so you've got to simulate that somehow in your training before the race. And so the way I did that, I trained very early in the morning. So, I would go out at 4:30 or 5 in the morning and start training, because I didn't want it to get in the way of any family time. And so I try to be very, very careful on the things that get in the way of family time. I like to be a part of family events. We like to travel and go and do things. And I also like to coach. And so it's fun. Like every season, I pick another kid to be the coach. So I get to work with them one-on-one and with their team. And that gives me a lot of time to spend with them. And because it is so scheduled, I can't bail out. When I agree to be the coach or agree to volunteer for something, I can't day of say, oh, you know what, I'm not going to show up. I don't have time because I have this church event. So it creates intentional time with the kids.
Yeah, the word that really comes to mind for me is proactive. It seems like you're being really proactive with your intentional time. And so when the church comes up with something reactive, you're already pretty committed.
Yes, for the most part. I think you got to be honest and say, I can always do better. And as a matter of fact, just a couple of days ago, I came in from a retreat. I had to do a 2-day retreat because something came up at the church, and we had to go away and really pray and figure out what we needed to do. And I came home and I was home in time for the kids to come home from school. But my son, Micah, he said, "Hey, Daddy." And I said, "Hey, did you miss me?" And he said, "I didn't know you were gone."
Ouch.
Oh, man, it really cut me to the core. And I said, "What do you mean you didn't know I was gone?" And he said, "Well, you work so late. Sometimes I didn't know you were out of town." And so that was, I need those reminders. And that was a deep reminder, man. It hit me hard.
Man, kids are brutally honest, aren't they?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And Micah's the one. If you want to know the truth, Micah's going to tell you the truth.
He's going to give it to you straight, no chaser.
That's right.
Now you're naturally inclined, and I know this from the time that we worked together, you're naturally inclined to do a lot of stuff in the evening. You're more of a late owl than an early morning. We're opposites in that regards. I'd like to be in bed about 9:30 or 10 if I could swing it.
Yeah.
How do you manage your evening time with the kids? Where do you make that back up at?
Well, what I have tried to do, certainly over the last couple of years, and I don't recommend this. This is probably not a healthy practice, but it has worked for me, is I will pull an all-nighter before I disrupt my time with the kids. So, for instance, if I've got to do a set design or work with the team to do a new graphic plan for the church or for a series or something like that, instead of missing out on what's happening with family time, I will wait until we put the kids to bed and then I'll go to work. And sometimes that means that it's going all night long. And I come back in at 8:00 in the morning and my wife Denise is like, "Where have you been?" Or "I can't believe that took all night." And so I have chosen to do that instead of miss out on what my kids are doing. And especially with the wide age ranges of my kids.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. And so it's not fair for me to be at one kid's activity and miss the other kid's activity, So I have to be fair and work through that and try to do the best I can. What I'm finding though, Tony, is now at 42 years old, man, those all-nighters come at a cost.
Yeah, what's the cost, man? The thought of it makes me shudder.
I mean, I'm not as young as I used to be, and that used to be a normal practice that, man, I could just go, and it's getting harder and harder and harder. And so, there's some days where I'm like, gosh, I'm 42 years old. When is the young buck going to come behind me and be the all-nighter guy that I get to mentor and lead? It's still interesting that I'm the guy still pulling all-nighters.
Yeah.
But I think that's the way God wired me,
Right. It does segue us into an interesting part, because so much of your job is creative, as you mentioned, with graphics and set design, and of course you're a talented and incredible worship leader. How do you schedule margin for creativity?
Man, that's a really good question, because sometimes I do it well, and then other times I don't do it well at all. And so I can always see those times when I don't do it well, because the work might still be adequate, but it's never as good as it could have been had I scheduled the right time to do the work. And so we're releasing music and writing and things like that. And the reality is, you have to intentionally schedule time to write and to create graphics, or to design and work on new things that are creative in the church. Because if you don't, it's just going to be the leftovers. And typically it'll be something you steal from something else, because it's really not creative. You just didn't have time to do it yourself, so you had to borrow it from somebody else.
Let's dive deeper into that a little bit. How do you, practically speaking, are you just using iCal, or using Outlook, or how do you block schedule? How do you make all that work?
Yeah, I schedule everything. So everything goes on my calendar. And so my calendar looks ridiculous, because it looks like I'm booked from like 8 o'clock in the morning until midnight, because I like to put everything in my calendar, including going on a date with my wife or going to my son's basketball game, because I know if I don't put everything on the calendar, there are always little things that pop up every single day. There's someone that calls the church and would like to have a meeting, and there are always those conversations. And so it's helpful for me to have my phone ding at me and say, you're late for a meeting, or your meeting starts in 5 minutes. And that meeting might be that I'm spending 30 minutes working on a graphic or something else creative that's happening in the church.
So now I've heard this from other people, but it sounds like you use your calendar as a way to kind of protect your free time. And then if somebody says, hey, James Keith, you got 30 minutes, you can look at your calendar and then give them an honest answer.
That's right. And I think that's fair, because when I don't schedule those things out, when I don't schedule time out with my family, or I don't schedule time out with my wife, I'm really saying they're not as important as the other things that are coming up last minute. And that's just not fair when they should be at the top of the list of importance of the things that we're doing in our life.
Yeah, no one ever looks back and said, man, I wish I worked more.
You are correct. You are correct.
So now you also carry the mantle of pastor and spiritual leader for this community, in addition to Pastor Patrick. What do you do in your daily routines with God to stay connected?
I think you're on mute.
Workday's starting to sound the same.
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
I have a lot of conversations. I'll tell you that God and I, we have this interesting dialogue with each other every day. I'm not one that prays these beautiful scripted prayers that you might hear someone pray or someone write down that we've heard so many times before. I'm one that argues with God, that really likes to have honest conversation with God. And I think because of that, God gives me the opportunity to hear some honest answers. And so along with that, I'll read scripture. I'll flip through the Bible. Like I was wrestling with something the other day, and I just said, all right, God, I'm going to flip my Bible, and I just want, wherever it goes, I want you to speak to me through the scripture that comes out. And that has been a healthy practice, because it's also a trust that God can speak in any word. And so I also have accountability partners and people that feel comfortable and I allow to have honest conversation with me and to say, hey, I see you're either working too much. I mean, the reality is a couple of months ago, Patrick, we had lunch together and he's man, you're killing yourself. Like you have to back off. And I even said to him in that moment, I said, but what about the church? Like there's so much that has to be done. And he reminded me that there will always be a lot to do. There will always be so many things that we could do all the time, but life is too short and there's too much to risk if we don't do the right things and make sure we're grounded and healthy and spending time with our family.
So your time with God is pretty Holy Spirit led in the sense that you don't have necessarily a reading plan, or is that included in that, or some combination of the two?
It is. I'm actually doing a reading plan right now through YouVersion, but it's not an everyday thing. Like I might go a day or two and then come back to it. And then I'll kind of get myself caught up, and then I'll sometimes get bored with a reading plan and then start another reading plan, and then I'm doing 2 reading plans. So that is, I use those, but for some reason it doesn't, it's not the most helpful thing for me. Like right now I'm trying to go back. It's been a long time since I've done the 1-year Bible and read the Bible all the way through. And so that's what I'm trying to do right now. And I missed a day and I had to get myself caught up. And so life is happening, man.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's, I really appreciate the way that you kind of approach your spiritual disciplines in the sense of like, you go with whatever is working, whatever. It's like on a basketball game, you go with the hot hand, right? And so how do you parlay faith into your family as a pastor? Obviously, you're probably getting to the church if they start setting up at 5:30. You're probably getting there at 5:30 in the beginning. Maybe if you got some really good leaders now, you're probably getting there at 6:30 or 7. So it's not like you're able to really walk through with the kids and the wife on Sunday morning. How do you work to instill a faith discipline and balance with your family?
Well, I tell you, the amazing thing for me is that Denise is a church planter's wife.
Tell me more about that. What's that mean?
That she has embraced the role of being a pastor's wife, and even beyond that to being a church planter's wife, because that's a big job. It's a big deal to be a pastor's wife, and there's a great deal of responsibility that comes along with that, and also there's a lot of understanding that comes along with that, and Denise does that so gracefully. And then she is a helper as well, and man, she will roll up her sleeves and get right into the church to help build this church that we're working so diligently to get off the ground. And the interesting thing is we're seeing that instilled in our kids. Just this past Sunday, I was kind of running a little bit late on Sunday morning to get to the church, and it was about 6:15 when I left the house. Fortunately, I don't live far from the church. But 6:15, I know that the guys have already started. We're already texting and things are going on. As I'm pulling out of the driveway, my 10-year-old son is running down the back steps, putting on his shoes, and he's flagging me down. And he's like, "Dad, I want to go. I want to go. I want to go." And so I roll the window down and I'm saying, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I want to go help set up." And I said, "All right, buddy, hop in the car." And so he jumps in the car and we get to the church, and I go to my area to start working, and he moves. His job that he likes to do is he goes to the nursery area and he puts down the foam floor so the kids have a safe place to play. And so I just love that yes, it's hard, and there are sacrifices that we're all making and that we're certainly making as church planters, but to be able to raise kids that know why this is important, and that we get to have the opportunity into reaching a whole new generation for Christ. And it ultimately could change this whole community, this new town of Pike Road, and give people an opportunity to meet Christ that may not have that opportunity otherwise. And to see a 10-year-old want to be a part of that, man, that's incredible.
And I mean, in so many ways, it's like you guys are on mission together.
Absolutely. And so it's funny that you say that, because we have joked about that, because there was a moment where our family talked about moving to Africa and being missionaries in Africa, and what that would mean, and the cost of raising kids in that environment and all of that. And so in that, that's exactly what we feel like here in Pike Road.
Now wait a minute, we can't just drop a bomb like that and say like and then walk away from it. But how does, because maybe our family's just different. I don't know, but like we've never come to a place where like, oh, we should move the whole family to Africa. How did that even become a point of conversation?
Well, I had the opportunity to serve with several trips and lead a trip in the South Sudan, and there was God spoke to me on that trip, and I just knew that there was something special about that place, and there was a peace that came over me when I was there, and I just fell in love with the people of South Sudan. And so when I came home, I felt that was something that we needed to pray about and dig in. And I'm still holding out. I think that there could be a moment, I mean, we took Denise and I took two of our kids to Haiti a year and a half ago, and that was a profound experience for both Denise and I and the kids, and just figuring out what that means, even raising kids and what that looks like. If Denise said yes, I would be on a plane tomorrow. And so who knows, that could be in our future, but I think right now we still feel like we're on the mission field, even as a whole family, because in a lot of ways we're in a community that was not ours. We are meeting people and getting to know people that were not in our connection or circle of influence, and they're learning to love us, and we're learning to love them, and we're creating community and church together, and it's a powerful thing, whether it's in Africa or whether it's in Pike Road, Alabama.
Yeah, certainly God is using you in such incredible ways there in Pike Road, and you're really living out your call, and you got a great team, so no chance of you leaving anytime soon, I don't think. Of course, God is still sovereign, so who knows what can happen. But
who knows?
Who knows? How many years have you been in ministry total?
Oh, So I guess 19 years. Well, no. I started ministry in 2001. So right after September 11th. So like 17 years. It has. It's been a wild journey. Started a couple of years as an intern and then went into full-time ministry at Gulf Shores United Methodist Church in Gulf Shores, Alabama. I was there for 7 or more years, moved to Ohio, served at Ginghamsburg, and then ended up back in Alabama here in Pike Road. So it's been quite a journey.
What do you think the biggest change in you has been over the 17 years that you've done this ministry, this job? I mean, I think that there are a lot of people who are in their careers and have done it for a long period of time, and they kind of sometimes they don't often take the moment to reflect back. If I'm going to give you that moment right now, what do you think the biggest change inside of you has been?
Well, Tony, I'm an ambitious guy, so there has always been a part of me that felt like I could solely change the world. Like God could use me to do something so significant that would absolutely change the world. I think in my younger years, I thought that had to happen right away. And so that God would use me that moment and that second, and we would see something right then. And what I've learned as I've gotten older, that the dreams that I have, if I can accomplish those dreams in even a year or even 2 years, then they probably weren't God dreams. They were probably James Keith dreams, because a God dream takes a lifetime. And God will use your entire life to accomplish his purpose. And so as I've gotten older, I've realized that steady wins the race, and that it's certainly a marathon more than it is a sprint. And the end of my race, even though I might not accomplish the dream that God had before me, it might be the start of someone else's race that will continue that. And I've joked from time to time that God, I'm the guy that's not called to go into promised land, but I am the guy that's going to get the people to the edge.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to hand it off, and they're going to get to experience promised land.
Yeah, and give everybody some context on what that means if they've never read that story in Scripture before.
Yeah, so Moses spent a lot of time with the people, and I'm sure there was a moment in his life where he's like, I want to experience promised land. But the reality is he didn't get to experience promised land. He roamed around the wilderness and everything else for a long time, and then ultimately handed it off. And so the people got to experience a promised land that Moses, who was God's chosen one to lead the people, did not get to experience.
That's a great illustration, and what a unique way to see yourself in that way. Do you ever wish that you were more Joshua than Moses in that story? You wish you look like, anytime God wants to bring up the promised land?
Well, I think any of us that wrestle with significance or want to be famous or any of those things. I mean, the reality is, I was an actor and I had the opportunity to see my name in lights, and
yeah, you were famous.
And so, well, that's pushing it, but I did, there was a moment where I came out of the stage door and people asked for my autograph, but the reality is I remember, and I sometimes forget this, and I have to remind myself that the whole September 11th moment when I realized my call into ministry, God said to me, the spotlight needs to move from you to me.
Oh, wow.
And so I started my ministry understanding that the spotlight needed to be moved to Jesus, and my whole life needed to be about helping people see Jesus under the spotlight, not myself. And I can be honest and let you know that there are moments where that's difficult, because, I want to have significance and I want to have an influence and a
Sure.
platform that leads people. But I hope I never forget that it's not about me, and that ultimately my whole call is to point people to Jesus. And so maybe it is fitting that God is going to give me the profound honor of helping people get to promised land, but I don't need promised land. That's not what I need. It's to help other people find Jesus and find that promised land.
Wow, that's incredible. And honestly, what a immense amount of spiritual maturity to kind of understand who you are and how God's wired you. And so let me ask you this: going into 2019, what are are you a New Year's resolution guy? Are you a guy that wants to work on things?
I am not a New Year's resolution guy. Do I have hopes and dreams and things that I want to accomplish in 2019? Yes. But I think one thing that the church plant world has taught me is we never know what tomorrow is going to hold, and we don't know the surprises that are going to come around the corner. But my hope for 2019 is that the vision that God has put before us for this church and this community at Century is we might see a piece of it in 2019, that God might give us a glimpse, or even show us that, yes, we have accomplished a step towards what he has called us to do. And then even in the creative side of the church, that God would use our church to be a voice to help people learn more about Jesus and to get to know that God loves us so much, and that God wants to have a relationship and be in community with us.
Yeah, because now by the time that this podcast airs, you will have dropped your very first single. Is that an accurate statement?
That is crazy to really think about. Yeah, so we started a publishing company with Century Church called Century Publishing. And so we're going to be doing a lot of content that's going to be coming out, but part of that is there's going to be a music side. And so we have already released a few singles with artists in our church, and my first single, Out of the Water, is out and is hopefully just a message that people can understand that, man, even though it may be tough or you may be in the mud, God really wants to pull us out. And the hook of the song is being pulled out of the water. So just like baptism, when you come out of the water, you're made brand new. And so I hope that resonates with people. It's certainly, every time I sing the song, it makes me smile. And it's a reminder that God is for us and not against us, and hopefully it makes some people smile and gives them hope in a. And
you wrote this song, right?
Yeah. So Laurel Taylor and I co-wrote this song together, and we went to Nashville and worked with some incredible musicians that are all over. Records everywhere, with Lauren Daigle and Little Big Town and Florida Georgia Line and Michael McDonald, like just incredible musicians, and you can certainly hear their musicianship in the song.
That's incredible. Now, when you wrote it, did you write it from any specific story in your life, or was it just kind of a culmination of a lot of things?
Well, Tony, and I don't know if you have 3 more hours to talk about my testimony, but sometimes I say to God in my prayers, and we talked a little bit about how I have banter with God and argue with God, but one of the things I say to God is, Lord, please no more testimony. Like, no more. Like there have been situations in my life that have been really hard, and I've really had to press into him to even find a way to survive some of those moments. And so I think the song was easy to write because the reality is there have been some dark days in my life, and it takes understanding that God can make us new, and certainly God can take those difficult times and restore us, just like the prodigal son story, that even though we can make some terrible decisions, God is waiting at the end of the driveway and just waiting for us. And the moment that he sees us, he is just running to us to embrace us and to welcome us back home.
Wow. Well, I'm excited. I cannot wait to hear how God is going to use Century Publishing and just all the ministry that you're doing there. If any of our listeners wanted to kind of follow you and hear more about you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so obviously you can get on iTunes or Spotify or Google Play Music, and you can search James Keith Posey and the song Out of the Water. Or you can just follow me on Instagram or Facebook with the handle James Keith Posey, my full name. So I would love to get to know you and talk to anybody that wants to have a conversation. And
if you're a aspiring worship leader out there, you've certainly mentored many of those throughout the years. A lot of what you're writing is going to be able to be used in churches, right?
Absolutely. So CCLI is also going to hold our publishing and our catalog. So you can go on CCLI and download chord charts and get resources, and you can certainly send me a message in Messenger, and I would be happy to send you charts or anything you might need to do this music at your church.
Wow. Well, James Keith, thank you so much for taking the time today and for just being so transparent and vulnerable and sharing your wisdom. And man, I love you, brother. It's so good to catch up.
Man, great to talk to you. Love you, man.
Thank you so much for giving the time today to listen to the Reclamation podcast, whether you're working out, riding a bike, doing whatever it is you're doing, shoveling snow. That was certainly me this past January. I just want to thank you for spending time with us today. Now, on our next podcast, we are very fortunate to have Lindsay Cunningham. Lindsay lives in Lexington, South Carolina, and she has a unique voice in the world. She is a pastor's wife, stay-at-home mom, in addition to a whole bunch of other side things. And in her conversation, we dive into what it means to balance her calling as a pastor's wife, a mom, and how to deal with resentment in ministry. We had a great conversation. We dive into a lot of topics, including the Enneagram, which she's super passionate about. So join us. The best way to make sure you don't miss an episode is to subscribe. Also, the best compliment you can give us as a new podcast is to leave a rate or review. It helps other people find us on all the social media platforms. Hope you guys have a great day.
Like what you heard? Please take a minute to rate and share so others like you can find good practices for faith and life.